Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another session with Doug and Alea. And in this session, we want to talk about shame. So I'm going to start off because, of course, I come from the more scientific, neuroscience, psychological perspective, and I'll give you my ideas around shame and what I've learned, and then we'll get Alea's perspectives. So the first thing that I want to say about shame is that it's taboo. It's probably the most powerful emotion that we have, and yet it's the one emotion that we don't talk about. In fact, we are shamed to talk about shame. And that seems to be implicit in American culture. And so when we become shamed or we feel shame, oftentimes because it's taboo to feel shame, we then have other emotions like anger and resentment and annoyance and that sort of thing. Shame is biologically derived. It evolved in humans many, many, many millions of years ago as a means of social control, because millions of years ago, humans didn't last very long. And the only way they survived was by cooperating within very small groups. Those people who took or stole or engaged in bad conduct died because nobody would support them when they got hurt or injured. And those people who were able to regulate themselves so that they might have an impulse to do something against the interests of the group, but stop that process, survived because they were able to get the support of the group. And this evolved. It was such a strong evolutionary adaptation that the actual aspect of pain became very painful because it was highly adaptive, very, very useful. And so today, we're all born with shame. We have mechanisms in our brain, neural circuits, that actually produce this painful experience that we call shame. The other way to look at shame is as a signal that a bond is threatened. So that, for example, infants are born with shame, the affect shame, not the emotion shame, but the affect shame. As they begin to grow and mature, that affect turns into an emotion, and parents use it quite abusively to control children. And the child, when shamed, feels the threat of a loss of attachment or loss of a bond with mom or dad, and it becomes even more intense than fear. And that's why shame is used by parents unconsciously as a form of social control in young children, because intuitively parents pick up that shaming a child is more powerful than scaring a child. And it turns out that all of this is incredibly abusive. We didn't know that up until about 10 or 15 years ago, but we know it now. And of course, this is all new knowledge that will take, unfortunately, generations to get out into the public so we can understand what the shaming mechanism is and teach children non-abusively about shame and what it is and how to manage it. The problem, of course, is that when shame becomes too intense, it becomes dysfunctional and it can become clinical. So you can have people suffering from depression or borderline personality disorders or other kinds of personality disorders where they're coming up with coping and defensive mechanisms in order to ameliorate the pain of the shame that they feel within them. And we see shame all around us. What's also very interesting is that people who think that they are high value in a group don't feel shame. And we can think of people who are like that, narcissists and certain political figures feel no shame. At least they don't show the shame on the outside because they have no shame. They're not afraid of losing their social standings. There is also the idea of modesty. And the history of shame and the history of etiquette and manners and the history of the so-called civilized world all wraps around this idea of shame. And modesty is nothing more than a nice description of imposing feelings of shame, embarrassment, fear, and guilt on young children, especially young girls, to socially control them and to make them obedient to patriarchal authority. And of course, that has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. So I think the summary of what shame is, and I don't think that there is a whole lot more to talk about other than just recognize that shame is taboo. We can't talk about it. If we feel shame, we're told that we're weak or we're vulnerable or we're exploitable. And like many other intense basic emotions, we do everything we can to avoid it. But when we do feel shame, we are culturally forbidden from showing shame. And so we have to cover it up with anger or resentment or some other surface emotion so that people can't see that we feel shame. How's that for a summary, Leah?
Beautiful.
All right,
So
over to you.
I'm going to approach shame from a slightly different perspective and really from the stance of the empath. And I'm going to invite you to actually bring your awareness inside, taking a few deep breaths, and take a moment to think about something that happened in the last week, month, year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, a moment when you felt shamed by another. Somebody shamed you. And when you felt that shame coming from the other person, they obviously had words. It might have even just been a roll of an eye. We're unpacking it and looking at it from a different perspective and exploring the idea that the person that shamed you has not cultivated a lot of self-love. They are not deeply and profoundly in love with the light that flows within them. They have issues of self-worth, self-hatred, self-critic. And that self-hatred, lack of self-worth, they project onto others by shaming others. And so if you're an empath, you literally just got the bundle of their self-hatred, their lack of self-worth, their self-critic when they shamed you. And now you're stuck holding this bundle that belongs to them that has all of their feelings of shame. You interpret it as your own. And then when we're not the conscious empath or the empowered empath, you will start to try to work on this bundle of shame, the self-hatred that you're holding that doesn't even belong to you. And you'll feel responsible. And you might even apologize or give your power away to this person that just shamed you, wanting to shift it, heal them, make them feel better, thinking that if you make them feel better, you give your power away, you abdicate, you, oh, I'm so sorry, you change your behavior, you step out of alignment of your own truth, then that will somehow clear all of these empathic sensations that you're feeling of this person's self-hatred, their self-critic, their shame of themselves. It doesn't work that way. So you're left churning around in all of their stuff. And then you might start to go to anger, feeling angry that you just got shamed. The anger is there trying to help you return this empathic bundle of their shame back to them. And your anger is also there trying to retrieve any power that you might have given away to them. And whenever we get shamed and we do that dance with another person, somebody shames us and we get reactive, that's another indicator, or rather opportunity, for you to practice more self-love. But what typically happens is we walk around with everybody's shame bundles, all of their self-hatred, thinking that it's ours, thinking that we have to be fixing it and changing it. And then you start to empathically feel their self-critic, their self-hatred. Then you start engaging in the self-critic behavior, beating yourself up all day long, all night long. And then because you're beating yourself up with the self-critic, you start going to unhealthy behavior to soothe yourself because of the critic. So whenever we're in unhealthy behavior, we want to explore, how do we quiet that self-critic? Because when you don't have the self-critic, you actually stop having the unhealthy behavior. The unhealthy behavior might also be empathic of the bundle of the person that you're holding who shamed you. And so there are energetic steps and processes to help you return those bundles, return the shame. But the very first step is to have discernment and awareness that you may be empathically feeling another person who has not cultivated a lot of self-love, and for you to have compassion with the discernment, with the awareness, holding a space, recognizing it's their shame, return it back to them, send them information, and model how you love you but really a quality that flows within you, like the kindness or the integrity or the discernment or the joy, or the freedom that flows within you, then you are essentially modeling a solution to them and being in a place of self-love, which is the solution. So those are some of the energetic aspects around shame. And there's also the component around control, but that might be enough for tonight.
Well, I was going to talk a little bit about power and how shame can oftentimes be related to power. And when somebody is trying to shame you, let's take the typical example of a narcissist trying to shame an empath, very common. Really what's happening is the narcissist is trying to exert power over you by taking away your self-esteem. And you can resist that. You can say, if the only way that power over works is when there's somebody to exercise power over. And if you make what the narcissist is to you irrelevant, then that narcissist no longer has power over you and things change.
No fuel.
And that's true in any relationship. Anytime one person seems to have power over the other, if you're in the lower power position, all you have to do is remove the power lever. So oftentimes power is about somebody can either reward you or take something away from you. If whatever that something is no longer becomes important to you, then the person no longer has power over you and you can do whatever you want without consequence. So think about shaming as a form of power over, abusive form of power over, and then think about what is the power that this person is trying to assert over me. How can I make that, whatever that thing is, unimportant to me? And when you are able to do that, the power goes away and there's no more power. So think about that too.
And there's another piece. I mean, there's so many layers around shame, but the other piece that I kept reflecting upon prior to this conversation is that a lot of the times the people that we are closest to, mothers, lovers, friends, people that we really feel safe with, and we feel like, oh, they love us deeply. When that person shows up in your life and they shame you, there is this deep, profound sense of betrayal and confusion, upset, grief, because they just did something that was abusive. They just projected their fears, their judgment, their critic upon you. And that is not loving at all. That is not kind. That is deeply abusive. And so when we feel abused by somebody we thought loved us, we thought was safe, it really erodes the sense of safety in relationship. So if you're a parent, if you're a child, if you're a lover, if you're a friend, start holding more awareness of when you feel shamed by that person, when you shame another, and how to cultivate more safety, more love inside yourself so that we break the cycle of the shame.